The coronavirus and China. A former attorney general tells us why he is calling for an investigation into whether Beijing could have done more to stop the global pandemic. Ready to reopen. Analysis of the agreement between the government and church leaders to resume masses in Italy. New leadership. An interview with Andrew Walther, the incoming president and chief operating officer of EWTN News. And Christ the Consoler. Pope Francis tells the faithful 3 ways Jesus will help us if we ask. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, May 8th, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight, opening up houses of worship. When can more Americans go to church as the pandemic drags on? We are also following dismal job numbers, the nation reeling from unemployment. And 3/4 of a century ago, World War II came to an end in Europe. President Donald Trump took time today to pay tribute. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, today President Trump honored veterans who all those decades ago saved the world and our freedoms, including the freedom to worship, which the pandemic has curtailed.
It is good to be in the house of the Lord.
Vice President Mike Pence meets with faith leaders in Iowa as the pandemic inflicts more damage across the land.
I want to thank you and pastors, rabbis, priests that are here for the way your ministries never stop.
A new poll shows Americans are reluctant to return to church. 48% think services should be banned. 42% would allow gatherings with restrictions, and 9% want no restrictions on worship. The AP NORC poll also shows a jump in people watching online services and masses like those on EWTN. But for the faithful fearing loss of religious liberty.
People should be worried about losing some religious freedoms, which include the right to go into your place of worship.
Counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, told me people can worship responsibly and safely.
Some of our structures are huge. Our churches are huge. We can fit more than 50 people in there and still safely socially distance or wear masks or whatever protocols we need to follow to responsibly and safely and securely express our religious freedom.
Meanwhile, the economy. The U.S. unemployment rate rocketed to 14.7% in April, a level last seen during the Great Depression. Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany.
So this president, when faced with this very tough decision to put a pause on the hottest economy in modern history, said American lives matter most. And that's what he did. And I can tell you this, the president that got us to the hottest economy in modern history, he's done it once, and he can do it again.
The jobless numbers come on top of the death toll. In hard-hit New Jersey,
we announced with heaviest hearts 254 deaths yesterday. 300 and something people went into hospitals yesterday. So we have made an enormous amount of progress, but we're not out of the woods yet.
In another epic battle, 75 years ago, America defeated an enemy that terrorized the world, Nazi Germany. Today, President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump marked the anniversary of VE Day. They visited with veterans at the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C.
And earlier today, speaking before Republicans, the president said that the nation will have a transition to greatness very soon and that next year will be phenomenal, talking about the economy. And looking ahead to Sunday, the president wished mothers a happy Mother's Day. Tracy?
Okay, thank you, Owen. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reporting for us tonight. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is putting a task force to work to protect the U.S. against threats from China. The Republican-led group will investigate what the Chinese government knew about COVID-19 and when did they know it. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports.
The Communist Party of China hid the seriousness of this disease, led a propaganda campaign blaming the U.S., used their supplies to exert influence, and continue to refuse international experts to investigate what happened.
Now, Leader McCarthy says a task force of U.S. lawmakers will investigate China. Today, a Chinese government spokeswoman criticized that plan, saying, quote, politicians should be held accountable by the American people, rather than shifting the blame to China.
China is an atheistic regime.
Everything they do is their religion is to advance the regime.
Former U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions tells me China was negligent.
They've lied to the world that's caused this incredibly dangerous and devastating pandemic. It could have been avoided had they been honest with us.
And to protect U.S. trade, he says U.S. tariffs against China are a smart move.
We need to tell China, if you cheat us, if you continue to take advantage of us, then we're going to restrict your access to our markets.
Free trade supporters say it's not the right time for more tariffs on China.
Once we get through this, sure, let's do what we can to look and make sure that it never happens again, and that those who are responsible are held accountable.
Nevertheless, President Trump has threatened to impose stricter tariffs against China. The former U.S. Attorney General is looking ahead to what the congressional investigation reveals about the Chinese Communist government.
Every person is a child of God, precious in his sight. The communists don't see it that way. Human beings are subordinate to the agenda of the communist regime.
Leader McCarthy will have the task force investigate a range of China-related issues, including their efforts to steal U.S. technology. Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Police have arrested 2 men in the fatal shooting of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia. Officials say the investigation picked up steam this week.
They hit that pavement hard yesterday doing neighborhood canvasses, talking to other individuals who had already been spoken to, some individuals who had not. And then after the course of that investigation yesterday, about 5 p.m., we had a command staff level conference call with the boots on the ground agents here in Glenn County.
Arbery was unarmed and jogging in a neighborhood when he was shot and killed in February. Police arrested 64-year-old Gregory McMichael on the left and his 34-year-old son, Travis. Australia's Prime Minister says the country has set a date to reopen its economy.
It is our goal to move through all of these steps to achieve that COVID-safe economy in July of this year. In this plan, we walk before we run. We know we need to be careful to preserve our gains, but we also know that if we wish to reclaim the ground that we have lost, we cannot be too timid.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison says restaurants and cafes will be allowed to reopen with some social distancing requirements. He added there are no plans to resume general international travel. Churches in Italy are preparing to resume masses, weddings, funerals, and baptisms on May 18th. The Italian Bishops' President and the Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte signed an agreement to resume religious ceremonies yesterday. The protocol outlines rules and regulations that must be followed to avoid the risk of the coronavirus. Andrea Gagliarducci, Vatican analyst for EWTN News, joins us now from Rome by Skype. Andrea, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Andrea, tell us, what type of measures will churches have to comply with once they resume masses in a couple of weeks?
Well, the churches signed a protocol with the government. So obviously they have to hygienize all the areas, all the buildings of the church. There is a restriction on people, on the attendance of people, but the restrictions will be based on the proportion. So every priest will have to calculate how many people can get into the church according to the measures of the church, how big the size of the church is. So it's a little less strict than what we expected. There will be no sign of peace. The confirmations are suspended, but there will be marriages, weddings, and there will be also first communions. Which is strange in the government protocol is that it even says that the Sunday observance can be suspended because of emergency reasons, which was odd to see in a governmental document. And then, obviously, all the restrictions that we already know, you need to wear the medical masks all the time, and there will be safety measures for to deliver communion as well. Although the priest will deliver communion as usual, just on the hands, not on the mouth, and the priest will have to wear the medical mask while he delivers communion. So it's not as strict as we expected. Actually, it's later than we expected because it started on May 18, but we'll see how it works.
Are the Italian bishops and are the faithful happy with this decision, do you think?
Well, the faithful are happy because they were longing to go back to Mass. There was a real hunger for Eucharist. People wanted to go to Mass. They wanted to be in the church. So, despite any kind of criticism, they will go to the Masses. They're happy to get back there. Bishops, well, they expected to get back to the churches, to have churches with audience, with people already on May the 4th. So they were a little upset in the beginning. They had to accept this new situation. They did their best to do that. Now they will comply with the rules and they will see what they can do. So there can be some more bitterness among bishops, but in the end, we made it.
What do you think the Vatican learned from this experience? And do you think there are going to be any hurdles after this?
Well, it's mostly from the legal point of view. I will say that Holy See had to learn that secular governments cannot stop the celebrations. I think they were too much appeased with the governments because it's obvious that in a situation of emergency, generally you cannot have masses with large gathering, you cannot have that kind of crowds. It's even true that in that case, you have to ask the government to at least formally respect the freedom of worship, which is not just the freedom of a priest to celebrate Mass, but also freedom for people to attend to Mass. And this is something they will have to work on because there will be other epidemics. I will say that's one of the major threats for this millennium. Will be more threatful than worse. So they will have to learn how to handle the situation, as they did already in the past with the big plagues.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your analysis with us. We really appreciate it. Andrea Galeoducci, Vatican analyst for EWTN News. Thanks again, Andrea.
Thank you.
EWTN News has named its new president and chief operating officer. Andrew Walther joins us as a veteran Catholic journalist, media executive, and religious freedom advocate. In a statement, EWTN chairman and CEO Michael Warsaw says, in part, Andrew's, quote, leadership experience with a global Catholic communications and media operation and his previous work with the National Catholic Register and EWTN News Nightly gives him the added advantage of already knowing the Catholic media world and many of the people within the EWTN family. We look forward to having him lead and strengthen our news division. End quote. Walther joins EWTN News from the Knights of Columbus, and he starts on June 1st and will report to Michael Warsaw. And Andrew Walther, the incoming EWTN News president and COO, joins us now on Skype from New Haven, Connecticut. Andrew, welcome back to the program and congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. I very much look forward to getting started there with you next month.
Absolutely. We are, too. I know you're no stranger to this program and to other news outlets of EWTN News.
Yes, that's true. In fact, the very first article I wrote for Catholic journalism was an article for the National Catholic Register 20 years ago about a missionary priest that I knew who was working in Africa and spending summers in Los Angeles at one of our local parishes. And it was a really exciting story to be able to bring people in terms of an understanding of the depth of faith that this particular priest had and the conditions in which he was working, the enormity of the size of his parish. And I think that these kinds of stories continue to be very important to tell in terms of giving a personal witness to the faith through the example of exemplary figures.
In addition to Catholic journalism, I know that you've also done a lot of work with the church around the world.
Well, yeah, that's true. Over the years, certainly in the United States and Canada and Latin America, as well as in Europe and the Middle East, and even a fair amount of work with the church in Africa on a couple of issues, you see a real global perspective on the church when you work with the church around the world. You see the ways in which the faith is so deeply meaningful to people. And you also see the ways in which the faith is unshakable in certain instances. Certainly, I did a lot of work for working with and on behalf of the persecuted Christians in Iraq and Syria. And you met people who had literally given up everything but the faith for their faith. And those people are a real witness to us. We often think, what can we do to help them? But in so many ways, I think their stories can also help us. And when you look at the church globally and you understand how dynamic it is, how multifaceted it is, the challenges that occur in different regions that the church confronts. I think it's a very, very interesting global experience of the church, very interesting regional issues, and I look forward to helping the EWTN family tell those stories together.
Well, we look forward to that, too. I'm curious, in your opinion, what do you see is so important about Catholic news?
Well, you know, Catholic news is an incredible tool of evangelization. And I think that especially at a moment like this, at a moment where people are often at home, where people are looking for content, where people are looking for spiritual nourishment, giving people the news from a Catholic perspective, giving people stories that can really help to nourish their faith, giving people an analysis of what's going on that makes sense from a faith perspective, bringing people the teachings of the church in a way that is authentic and attractive. I think all of this is really important, and I, again, very much look forward to helping you and the entire EWTN News team do just that in the months and years ahead.
Well, Andrew, we are really looking forward to it as well. Thank you so much for your time, and we are blessed to have you on board. Andrew Walther, incoming president and COO of EWTN News. Thank you again, and congratulations.
Thank you.
And you can read more about the appointment and more about Andrew at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Coming up, analysis of the U.S. economy as unemployment continues to skyrocket. As we reported earlier, today's unemployment numbers are a grim reminder of the devastating impact the coronavirus pandemic has had on the U.S. economy. The U.S. Labor Department report for the month of April shows a loss of more than 20 million jobs. That is the worst monthly loss on record. Joining me now on Skype is Stan Voiger, resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. Stan, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. First off, I'd like to start off by getting your reaction to today's numbers.
Well, the number is terrible, but you know it's in line with what we expected. We've of course seen major employment losses over the past few weeks. We've seen millions and millions of unemployment benefit claims coming in every week, and you know you add up those numbers, you get to the type of number we're seeing now. But that doesn't make the situation less disastrous. You know, the pace of job loss is much faster than it was even during the financial crisis. And so this is very worrisome.
Stan, do you think the numbers give us a complete picture of the U.S. economy right now, the impact that the pandemic has had on it?
Well, sadly, I don't think so. So the monthly unemployment report is based on a survey that's done around the 12th of the month. And so the numbers that came out today are actually reflective of the situation about 3 weeks ago. And we know that since then, quite a few additional people have lost their jobs. And so I think in that sense, the situation is actually worse. The only really positive thing to say, I think, is that the sort of financial side of the economy is stable and doing well, which is very different from what we saw 10 years ago.
The unemployment report indicated that the vast majority of April's job losses, about 90%, are considered temporary. In your opinion, do you think we'll see these jobs return?
Well, some of them, hopefully. I think an optimistic perspective would be to say there's been a lot of support for businesses, grants for small businesses, and credit support for large businesses through the Federal Reserve. And so hopefully that'll help some of those organizations continue to operate so that they can hire people back once the public health threat is gone. But obviously, that's going to be much less true for some industries. We have not had support for state and local governments really yet. And you know, those are going to shed significant numbers of workers if things continue the way they are. And so I think partially, yes. But one thing to keep in mind is even if everyone whose layoff is quote unquote temporary, according to this report, were hired back immediately, we'd still be pretty close to a 10% unemployment rate. And so, you know, the numbers really are not good at all, even, you know, in those reasonably optimistic scenarios.
Stan, we don't have much time, but I do want to ask you this last question. Some analysts have said that new industries may be born from the pandemic, or that maybe industries that kind of died off, like manufacturing, would make a comeback to the U.S. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think there's a few things that are important to keep in mind. In the report today, we saw in the industries that had some employment growth, right, and that includes things like delivery, the numbers are in the thousands, right? So that definitely doesn't make up for the losses. In manufacturing, manufacturing output is higher than it's ever been really in the U.S. And so there, the changes are much more about automation than about anything else. And, you know, the service industries are just the lion's share of U.S. employment. Something people don't realize is that there's more people who work in restaurants and in food preparation than in all of manufacturing right now. And so I just don't think that those kinds of, you know, returns of some the return of some manufacturing from abroad, or new delivery services, those are not going to make up for the kind of losses we've been seeing.
Well, Stan, thanks so much for coming on and for your analysis. We really appreciate it. Stan Voigo, resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. Thanks again.
Sure.
Up next, an initiative to spread prayer during the coronavirus. And Pope Francis has a message of encouragement for the faithful. In response to the fear and anxiety caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, the creators of a new website are hoping to visually track the spread of community through prayer. The Map of Hope allows users to post their prayer intentions and offer a rosary for someone else. Dots are placed on the map as users tag their location. The more people are praying in an area, the bigger the dot grows. So far, thousands of prayer intentions have been charted. Joining me now on Skype to talk more about this is the Map of Hope, is the co-founder of it, Mike Del Ponte. Mike, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Well, we've all seen the maps of the U.S. tracking the spread of COVID-19 across the country. What went through your mind watching those day after day?
You know, we knew that those maps were only telling one story. Be afraid, be anxious, the world is uncertain. But that's only part of the story. The other part of the story is that there's a lot of hope, and there's a lot of great things happening in the world. So we wanted to build something that gave people a sense of hope and community. And we thought to ourselves, what better than the rosary?
Mike, what do you want users to take away from your site, and what's been the response so far?
The response has been incredible. Within the first week, we had over 5,000 prayer intentions, over 20,000 site visits from over 130 countries. We want people to know that even if you can't go to Mass, you can still pray the rosary. And for centuries, the rosary has given people a sense of comfort and has also brought a lot of miracles, including ending plagues.
I know that your site points out that all faiths are welcome, but you do focus on praying the rosary, even including a video on how to pray the rosary. Why did you choose to highlight that?
You know, the rosary is a really significant and substantial prayer. It's something that takes time. You get to meditate on the life of Christ and his mother. You get to say the verbal prayers. You have the feeling of the beads in your hand. This is a serious time. We need serious support, and the rosary is the best prayer for that.
Mike, I read somewhere that about more than half of those who visit the website are between the ages of 18 and 34, and 70% of all visits are from a mobile device. What do you think that says about faith connections that you're making with younger people?
We're seeing younger people engage with the church in a new way. They're coming through social media, through Instagram, and they're finding that they can connect with other people. They may not be able to go to their local church or their youth group, but through the rosary, they can connect with a lot of other people, and they love this engaging site. You go to the mapofhope.com, put in your name, location, and prayer intentions. You see yourself and others on this map praying together, and you can pray for other people. And I think young people can just pull out their phone and get engaged in this in a very significant way. They love that.
Okay, quickly, last question. Where can people go to find out more?
TheMapOfHope.com is our website. It's so easy to use. You just go to TheMapOfHope.com and join the community.
Great. Well, Mike, thanks so much for coming on and sharing that with us. We really appreciate that. Mike Del Ponte, co-founder of the Map of Hope. Thank you again, Mike.
Thank you.
Pope Francis says Jesus will always console us in difficult times. All we have to do is ask.
Signore consola in vicinanza.
At his daily Mass at the Vatican, the Holy Father says our Lord brings us comfort in three ways: with hope, truth, and by remaining close to us. Pope Francis says even though Christ arrives in silence, we will feel his presence and know he loves us. And before we go, a reminder that EWTN broadcasts Mass throughout the day, including the Pope's Mass. Mass airs from Irondale, Alabama at 8 a.m., noon, and 7 p.m. Eastern. We are also airing other special programming, including the Pope's Daily Mass from the Vatican. And you can find our schedule at EWTN.com. There you will also find Eucharistic adoration throughout the day. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We're back on Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.